Hello and welcome to the 12 Blocks of Christmas Quilt Along. My name is Haley with Haley Stitches and I'm going to walk you through the entire pattern step by step. I'm so excited to sew with you. From now through December 13th, we'll go through one block of the pattern each day, and on the final day, we'll sew it all together into a quilt top. You can grab the free pattern using the link in the description of this video. The free pattern will give you a 45-inch square quilt in the Christmas tree layout. But if you want more sizes and layouts, you can check out the full paid pattern. It's on sale for just $7, that's 50% off, through the Quilt Along. For simplicity's sake, I designed the quilt pattern to be used with just a few colors, but this pattern works really well if you want to shop from your fabric stash or use pre-cuts. In these video tutorials, I'm going to be using a layer cake and show you how you can make each block super scrappy if you prefer that look. I know this time of year can get super busy for people, so if you have a lot going on this December, don't worry, these videos are going to stay on YouTube and the pattern will stay free. So you can dive back into it when you have the time. So before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you don't miss a video, and make sure you get that free pattern using the link in the description below. Let's dive into block number 1. These are the supplies we'll need to make this quilt. I'm going to be using a layer cake instead of yardage just to show you what it can look like if you give it a scrappy feel with scraps from your fabric stash. I'm going to be using this coffee mug fabric as my backing, this white color as my background, the green as my fabric 2 in the pattern, and then I'm going to be using this 2.5-inch strip fabric for my binding. I'm really excited to try that. All that fabric is from Art Gallery Fabrics. You'll also need a cutting mat, a rotary cutter, matching thread, pins, and having alphabetes or something to label your pieces with is really helpful. You'll be using your long quilting ruler and a square ruler. A 6.5-inch square will be most helpful, but anything bigger than that will work as well. Everything is going to be linked in the description below. So I don't have a lot of method to my madness with pairing the fabrics together for the blocks in this quilt. I'm just kind of winging it. All I know for sure is that I'm going to be pairing a darker fabric with a lighter fabric to help give that contrast and mimic the background and fabric 1 and 2 in the pattern. So the first block is called the Friendship Star block, and I'm going to be using the plain background color for the background of this block, and I'm going to be using this bright red for the fabric 1. I cut all the fabric to size according to the pattern. A reminder to download the free pattern in the description of this video if you haven't already. And then we are going to start by pairing our A and C squares and turning them into half square triangles. So this is where it can get really important to label your fabrics, especially if you cut them all ahead of time. The first step with this half square triangle assembly is going to be drawing a line on the back of your background fabric. So I am using a disappearing ink marker. I'll link that below. I didn't mention it in the beginning of this video, but you definitely will need a marking utensil of some kind to make this quilt because there's a lot of half square triangles involved. So we're going to draw a diagonal line corner to corner on both of those white background squares. And then we're going to pair them with our fabric 1, which is the red fabric. We're going to place the squares right sides together, so that means the pretty side of the fabric will be touching the pretty side of the fabric. And then we are going to sew a 1/4 inch away on both sides of the marked line. After sewing the pieces together, it's time to cut them apart, and all you're going to do is cut directly on that marked line from corner to corner on both of these half square triangle units, and this is going to give us 4 identical half square triangle units. And the next step is to press, and I prefer to press to the side, so I'm going to press towards the darker side, so towards the red fabric, and this is going to make sure that nothing shines through after they're all pressed and trimmed. So here we have our 4 pieces pressed, and now I'm going to show you how to trim them down to size. So these little guys are going to be trimmed to 2.5-inch squares. The quilt that we're making is made up of 6.5-inch unfinished blocks. So if you prefer to work with bigger pieces, you may want to check out the paid pattern because that offers 9.5-inch and 12.5-inch blocks. So it's a little bit easier if you prefer to work with larger pieces, and of course you'll end up with a larger quilt at the end. So to trim these squares, the most important thing is you're lining up that diagonal on the half square triangle with the diagonal on your ruler. And then you're gonna make sure that you're at the 2.5 inch mark on your ruler. And you'll just trim all 4 sides until you get a nice square piece. And you'll repeat that for each of the 4 half square triangles. And now that we've pieced our half square triangles and trimmed them, it's time to lay out our full block. So we're going to take our B and D pieces that we cut earlier, and we're going to put them all together with our half square triangles to make our friendship star block. So I'm going to lay it all out so you'll be able to see what the final block looks like, and it'll be a lot easier to piece this way. So basically the background fabric are in the corners, and then that candy cane fabric in the center, and then the half square triangles are going to rotate around in the middle of each side, and that's going to give us that classic friendship star block look. And you'll just want to make sure that your half square triangles are all oriented the correct way. It's easy to get this one a little bit mixed up. And to piece this block, we're going to piece it row by row. And after the rows are pieced, we're going to press in opposite directions. We'll press the top and bottom rows towards the center and the center row towards the outside. And that's going to help make sure that everything nests and it looks really good when we start piecing it together. So here's a close-up of what I mean when it nests. Because those seams are pressed in opposite directions, the lines are going to line up really nice and make sure we have those nice crisp corners. And here you can see that the corners of the half square triangles don't go directly to the edge, and that's just accounting for the seam allowance. So if yours look like that, that's exactly perfect, exactly how it's supposed to look. And this is what it looks like after it's all pieced together. I'm going to press those final seams open just to help reduce a little bit of the bulk. And the last step is to trim it down to 6.5 inches. So here, the easiest way to make sure it's 6.5 inches is to line it up with your ruler and make sure that each of the corners of the half square triangles there have a 1/4 inch seam allowance so that you don't lose those points when we finally piece the entire block together. So you really should only have little slivers to trim off. If you're finding that your blocks are too small, you'll want to adjust your 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're probably sewing more than a 1/4 inch, and all of these little pieces really add up. So it's important for an accurate 1/4 inch seam just to make sure that everything is lining up correctly and you get the right size blocks at the end. I'm just finishing up my trimming here to make sure that everything is nice and square, and this is the end of the friendship star block, the first block in our quilt along, and you'll end up with a 6.5 inch friendship star block. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below or email me. I'm doing these voiceovers for the videos real time, so I can answer questions or talk about anything really that you guys want to, and I'll include any helpful tips in the daily emails I'm sending as well. So just a quick reminder to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a video in this quilt along, and be sure to grab that free download using the link in the description below. All right, I'll see you tomorrow for the next block.